Welcome to the Jack Hakimian Podcast, where we dive deep into life, embracing the contrast. From culture to faith, art to finances, politics and everything in between, we're taking chances. Jack Hakimian Podcast, we shine a light, exploring all of life from day to night. Nothing is off the table, we keep it real. Diverse perspectives, the truth we reveal.
All right, friends and family, I want to thank you for being on this broadcast of my podcast, that rhymes. Today, I have a very special guest that means a lot to me and my wife. We have just an incredible story of how we met randomly or maybe sovereignly in West Covina. And it's been just amazing to see her journey of faith, of motherhood, of just being a wife, a friend, and just someone who's always been just a symbol of grace, someone who has been very inspiring, even with her, I would say, gracious resistance towards everything that's evil and controlling. And I think today she has an amazing story as she talks about her journey through stage 4 cancer and just her life and her testimony and what has contributed to her being the person that she is today, and what God is doing with her right now in this moment, and what she's looking forward obviously for the future, and even some things that she's doing with her health and how she's coping and thriving and surviving in this world, and some of the bumps and bruises in this journey. So I want to just go ahead and introduce my sister in Christ, Debbie Merriman. How you doing, Debbie?
Hi, Jack. I'm very well. So happy to see you.
You too. And I was trying my best to not get too deep in our pre-live conversation.
Yeah.
To not take away. I think really is going to be an inspiring and authentic conversation of just human beings that are really trying to know God's love and receive that love for ourselves and give it to other people. And I've really seen that in your life. And I know that when I first met you, I think it probably was, I want to say, you probably will remember this better. I don't know. I have a horrible memory, but I want to say it was maybe 1999, maybe 2000. It could have been around that time. I think we had just, yeah.
It would have been, I think, 2001, maybe.
2001, okay.
I think Shalom was one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think her and Jacob are pretty much the
They're
same
like a year
age, right?
apart, aren't they?
Year apart? Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe not
Jacob,
quite.
Yeah, Jacob's 25. So yeah, that sounds right.
Okay, Shalom turned 24 in June.
Okay. So I guess, yeah, it was around 2000 then. 2001, yeah. Like you said, 2001.
Yeah.
I thought they were pretty close, not too far, because
Yeah.
we're thinking about kind of matchmaking them at some point and have them in some kind of prearranged marriage, and they were so cute together.
Soji and Josiah were the two that seemed like in the end were most likely.
Yeah.
She definitely was very I don't want to say possessive. She liked Josiah a lot.
Yeah,
she's 20 now, by the way, Josiah.
Okay. I will definitely pass that message along. You never know what God does. So yeah. So tell me, where did it all begin for you, far as your childhood? Because I kind of want to go chronologically through your life and just how you came to know you had cancer, and how you've coped with it, and what is your theory as to causation? So that's going to be an interesting conversation, but I really am I'm interested in your story, and just what God has done through you since you were a young girl, and
Mhm.
the lessons you've learned. So, like, where did it all start? Are you a California by native, or did you guys migrate to California? What's the story there with your parents and childhood?
Okay. Yeah. Multi-generational native Californian. I think on my mom's side, 2 or 3 generations. On my dad's, I think he was born in New Mexico, but then moved back or moved to California at some point, I think in his teenage years. So yeah, grew up here. Grew up in Garden Grove for the most part, and Westminster and Orange County. Um, Moved to Hemet when my dad got a job as a manager of, I don't know if you remember TG&Y stores.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Store, it was like a Walgreens or a Rite Aid or any of those
Okay.
from long ago. Yeah, it's a dime store. Yeah, you could go in there and buy a cheap Easter basket or Christmas present for your kid and your eye drops and nasal spray. Um, so I grew up initially in a Presbyterian church. When we moved to Hemet, we were just looking for a good biblical church. We weren't looking for a Presbyterian church necessarily. So we ended up at a really good, solid Baptist church, and grew up in the Lord. Accepted Christ one Sunday morning in, I want to say, 3rd grade, probably. I was in Sunday school, and the lesson was about hell. And I came home after church, and my mom was making lunch. And I said, Mom, is it true if you don't accept Jesus into your heart, you'll go to hell? She said, Yes, it is, Debbie. Would you like to pray? I was like, yeah, of course. Of course I want to be a Christian. So I prayed with my mom and just really wanted, my whole childhood, really wanted to serve the Lord, really wanted to do whatever God wanted me to do. Enjoyed church, enjoyed going to camp with church youth group and kids groups, and went to a Christian college. Attended Westmont College. I knew even at that time I had a call to the mission field. So I was in college for maybe, I wasn't sure why specifically, but I knew I wanted to go to school and then go on the mission field. Ended up studying English literature and use my English major now as an English teacher, English language instructor. Let me think what else might be interesting.
And I know you did some missions. What were those adventures like?
So after college, I had some debt. I went to work for a couple of years, and then actually my grandparents ended up paying off all the student loans for all their grandkids at that time after a couple of years of paying off loans. Yeah. So that opened up my ability to go onto the mission field. And I had picked out a program called Spearhead at the time. It was part of Latin America Mission. The name has since changed. It's called, I think it's just called Vanguardia, which is Vanguard. And it was a really good program. It was created by a man who saw that Mormon young people almost across the board gave their 2 years after college to service. And he said, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't our young people looking at missions as something you would assume you were going to do unless God explicitly led you not to do missions? So he took it upon himself to create a program for young people about college age who wanted to do a mission in between college years or do a longer mission. And so that's what I got involved in, which it was church planting. Mexico City, worked under a Mexican pastor, had a roommate, and lived with a Mexican family. And that was kind of the philosophy of the program, was to, sorry, I have to turn my phone off.
Oh, no problem.
The purpose of the program was to put us under the leadership of Mexican pastors, train us under local leadership, and
That's amazing.
teach us to fit in as, culturally appropriate assistants
Oh,
to
wow.
existing pastors.
Wow, that's really they were really ahead of their time when it came to like cultural contextualization and
I think
and
so too.
and I've always seen that in you, that you're very comfortable with people of different cultures, very, very cross-cultural. I saw that in our fellowship, and then when we merged with, I believe it was New Heart.
Yeah.
And but yeah, d- did your elementary, middle school years, did that play a role also? Were you kind of in a diverse community? As far as see, I'm thinking California was mainly, I think, three cultures, right? It was white, black, and Mexican. It wasn't even like all the various Latinas and Latinos out there. And then of course Asians started coming in, Koreans, Japanese, probably in the 80s and 90s. Um, did you kind of have that experience, or was it mainly an Anglo white community?
Well, my school was primarily white and Hispanic. There were a couple Black kids in the schools when I was growing up, but not a lot. And interestingly, there was some enmity between the Mexican and white kids, and not generally, not across the board, but there were gang fights. And so in terms of interactions, the people who were in classes with me, people who were in choir or theater with me or something else, those were friendly relationships, and then everyone kind of minded their own business aside from that. So I would say, on a racial tension scale, maybe a 4 or 5. So I wouldn't say I became multicultural in school. I just think I've always liked people. I like things that are different, things that are unique, people with ideas. I like talking with I like
You're
hearing what
curious.
people think. Yeah, I'm
You're
curious.
essentially, yeah, and I've seen that you're essentially a curious person. Did that,
Right.
they say curiosity killed the cat, right? Did that curiosity get you in trouble? As were you one of those girls that's like you're out there running around with the boys, being a tomboy, climbing trees, playing with insects you shouldn't be playing with? Were you? Because that's how I visualize you. You kind of were like a Tom Sawyer type of child that went on these community voyages.
It was more probably creativity of the mind. Like, I don't
Okay.
think I was a big risk taker, and I wasn't a tomboy. I was sort of in the middle between, feminine and tomboy, just not extreme in any way.
Okay.
So I think it was just that I enjoyed people. That was the main thing that maybe sparked an interest, and then I felt a very strong pull. Like I would call it a calling, definitely. It was probably the one thing in my life where the writing really did seem to be on the wall, like where you're always wishing God would give you clearer signs. That was definitely a clear leading from God to go overseas. And I was in Colombia as well. So those were the two countries. I spent about 2 years in Mexico and a year and a half in Colombia.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how
And
did
I
you?
had the opportunity to live with local families each time, which was just incredibly special and so good for language development and cultural development.
Okay, great. And did you? Which one did you like more, Colombia or Mexico?
Oh, wow. Very different countries. I would just say I liked different things about the different countries.
Okay.
I would say Mexico is just like one of the warmest, most colorful cultures you'll ever encounter. And people are genuinely interested in interacting and offering anything that might make you smile or fill your stomach or so incredibly generous, great sense of humor in Mexico. Very connected to indigenous culture. So there's a lot of pride in the Aztec and Mayan people who inhabited parts of Mexico. And there's no attempt to separate that from Anglo culture or from, European culture. When all of that mix took place, it seems like it was very thorough. The indigenous Spanish and primarily indigenous and Spanish initially.
Yeah, and I remember your Spanish being really good. Is it still good? Are you still using it?
Not like it was. I mean,
Okay.
I'm sure I could get back, but it's just one of those things, like you go for X number of years without using something and you're gonna. So I feel my tongue fumbling now, and I kind of embarrass myself a little, but I try not to let it.
Yeah.
I try not to let it stop me from speaking with somebody.
So, did you mention that did you have siblings, or were you only child?
I have 2 siblings. I have an older brother who lives in Oregon with his wife. His
Okay.
kids are adults, and a younger sister. She's a school teacher, 2 kids, lives with her husband in Hemet. My mom lives
Okay.
across the street from me, which is wonderful. And
Nice.
so really most of my immediate or close family is right here, local
Oh,
to
nice,
me.
nice. That's
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. Just my
So,
brother's out of town.
okay. So is he I mean, does he like Oregon, or is he just there by necessity kind of thing, or?
He does. I think he never really like loved Hemet, and I think the heat makes it really intolerable for him.
Yeah,
He's like a polar bear. He's got like thick skin or something.
yeah. I mean, it just, you find that some people like to be far, like from home base, ground zero, for many different reasons, right? Weather, cultural diversity, they just got kind of a traveling soul.
Mm.
What was it like growing up in your home? What were your parents like? Um, when you look back, how did that childhood it shape you? What were, like, far as like highlight moments, memorable moments that shaped you, both beautiful and nostalgic, and both maybe even traumatic?
Hmm. Well, I would say overall, I had, a pretty good childhood. I don't know where I'd put it on a scale of, perfect to horrible, but above average maybe. But my dad was a bit of a problematic father. He had a short temper, and he'd been yelled at and hit as a kid, and he didn't do a lot of hitting, but he was kind of an angry person some of the time. So there was some fear involved in that relationship with my dad. My mom was June Cleaver, basically. She was the absolute ideal of a suburban mom and housewife. And so she was spiritually very mature and very consistent. So, I had a mixture of, my father was a Christian, but had not conquered, I guess, some areas of his life that we would strive to, I guess, or want to. So the environment at home was sometimes tense, and he had
Okay.
an especially bad relationship with my younger brother. And so there was a lot of criticism, and it was painful. It was stressful. There was tension there because, not operating as a family should, ultimately, with everybody being treated fairly.
Okay.
We knew we were loved. But yeah, just my dad's issues were a problem.
Was it that he had an anger issue?
Yeah,
Okay.
anger, and I would say self-loathing.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And what was it about your youngest? Was it that your youngest brother reminded him of himself? Was he the kind of the strong one. There's always the youngest tend to be the most strongest and strongest will, rebellious. I was the youngest, but they also tend to act out the symptoms of the family. Like they will like they're like little prophets in a sense. Like they're like, I'm not taking that crap. Like Dad, you suck. Like they're gonna say the truth. They tend to butt heads with the power. Um, the power base, which it tends to be, dad, even if it was mom. Is that an accurate description of what was kind of going on there, or was there something more?
Well, he was the second to the last. My sister is the youngest.
Oh, okay.
Stephen, I don't remember him being confrontative with my dad. That was more me. As I got
Okay.
older, I became
Okay.
somewhat confrontative. No, I think he was just trying to get by.
Was it,
Yeah.
he wasn't, he felt like as a man, he needed to perform and be kind of a
Well, he just got
perfectionist?
yelled at a lot, picked at a lot.
Interesting.
He didn't do well in school. So he was also had a high IQ, but had pretty prominent ADHD.
Okay.
So a lot of difficulties concentrating in class. So he was in trouble at school, class clown kind of a situation.
Okay.
Not getting his work done on time or correctly. And so he had frustrations, a lot of frustrations at school and at home.
Did you feel like you need to be a protector at some point, or
To a degree, yeah, but I was 5 years
Yeah.
older. So
Okay.
like when he was a teen, I was in college.
Mm.
But yeah, I felt protective, but I kind of felt at the same time like I didn't feel like there was much I could do. Be
Okay.
friends to him, really, but I don't remember ever going to bat for him, honestly, with my dad.
Okay.
I don't think I did.
Were you one of those like college students that were just trying to escape the home, or did your mom create
No.
a level of stability that wasn't the case? You felt
Yeah, I
safe.
wasn't miserable at home by any means.
Okay.
So
Okay.
no, but when, at those specific times, it was painful, when my dad was being critical of my brother, being harsh with him. But
Okay.
no, I think all of us intended to go to college, and the 3 remaining live children all went to school, got a career, and I'd say we all made pretty good use of our options after college.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what kind of student were you? Were you the creative, artsy person in the back, always creating collages and arts and crafts, or were you like the math person that just loved doing math, or were you the pom pom girl? The athlete, running the marathon, or maybe a combination of all those. How would you describe yourself? The nerd, the
It's definitely
artsy?
not the athlete or the pom pom girl. I was
Okay.
the theater and choir girl.
Okay.
So kind of on the nerdy side, as far as artistic, not visual art. The closest I do to visual art is make jewelry.
Okay.
But I don't paint or draw or anything like that. So no, I would say if you could sort of put a one-word descriptor on me, I was the social one in college. Just
Okay.
I would like pop a bag of popcorn and go around to my suite mates to see who I could distract from their studies and who would come out and talk and
Wow.
enjoy school in that way.
Okay.
I got through, but I often wondered like how I passed my classes.
So you probably were socially motivated. You were like, in order for me to stay here and keep having all this fun I'm having, I need to at least get a seat, right? Does that sound
guess so.
kind of accurate? Okay.
I don't think I like thought it out in that way, but certainly I knew I couldn't go through and fail everything. So
Yeah.
I tried to, keep up with studies, but I have always been that person who does really well at the things she likes and that are easier for her, and who will procrastinate the other ones. So like math was not my subject. Philosophy class, I'm sure I could appreciate philosophy now, but I remember at the time thinking like philosophy is the most useless subject that we're forced to study while we're in school.
Yeah.
What else? So all my lit classes, I got good grades in. Math and science, poor grades, and then stuff that I was moderately interested in, mediocre, as kind of followed my interests. Whatever I was interested in was going to be good.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the rest I was going to get by.
And
I had
during,
other stuff to do too, you know.
yeah. So I mean, the stage was your inspiration. It sounds like.
Music and choir, yeah. Music
So you
and
like performing.
for sure.
So you like performing. Yeah. Okay.
I love
And
it.
did you see yourself becoming an actress or a singer professionally? Did you imagine that?
That was sort of the, when it came down to deciding between going toward missions, or the other option was acting and singing. And I think I probably knew teaching was on the burner there somewhere too. I don't know. I think I always felt like I had an affinity for teaching, which is what I ended up doing.
Okay.
After the mission field.
Interesting. And
yeah.
And how was your faith being integrated in your life as a young person? Were you just kind of a closet Christian at this point? Were you active in these like Bible clubs? Were you like, preaching Jesus, or was it just kind of a faith you kept to yourself, and then at some point it began to flourish? And what caused your faith to flourish?
Mm-hmm. So are you talking about kind of high school, college time?
Middle school, high school. Yeah, middle school, high school.
Well, I had a really good church. Cornerstone is what it's called today, which is not currently my church, but it was First Baptist at the time. And they had a great children's ministry. They put a high priority on their youth program. So we had somebody who really, really invested. He was very passionate about the Lord, about the word, about music, about ministry. He himself had been a missionary already in Africa and was wanting to go back on the mission field. So we had a very dynamic, passionate youth pastor. And he really saw people. He saw his young people. He understood their gifts and drew them in, really put them to work inside the youth group. So I think I had his wife too. She was a real mentor. Like, she really took the young ladies of the group under her wing. Her name is Robin. So Scott and Robin were the two who really poured into me and into my peers. And I mean, you couldn't ask for a better youth minister, really. So that was very inspiring. Always involved in ministry, involved in missions work, like when churches do a 1 week mission down in the summer, or Easter week, or Thanksgiving week. I was involved in high school, middle school. In college, we also had missions down to Mexico. I did a juvenile hall ministry in college. I was involved. I was pretty involved, eager to connect with other believers in ministry, and done a variety of evangelism and discipleship, Bible study, especially on the mission field. Did quite a bit of Bible study with women from the neighborhood.
Wow.
And so I've been involved. I've never been kind of more until once I started homeschooling, I was not as involved in ministry.
And when did you have that, like that moment that like you really yielded and surrendered yourself to Christ? Can you remember? Were you 5 years old? I know you came back and you heard a sermon on hell, but I'm thinking, right, like that was like an insurance policy. Did you have a moment, or was that the moment? Because I do hear testimonies of young kids who genuinely surrender. Now it's just an issue of sanctification throughout their childhood,
Mm-hmm.
where they're going deeper, but they did truly yield at 5 years old in Sunday school. What's your testimony in that regards?
I think it was, I mean, I always believed. So from the from the earliest memory of being taught in church, I believed. So I don't know that there was a moment where I realized, oh, this is real and this is true. I think I always accepted it as true. It was after that specific lesson about hell that I understood, oh, like there's a piece. I haven't done my part. Like I haven't done the taken the initiative to say, yes, I want to follow Jesus. Although I was under the assumption that I was going to be living for Jesus. So
Okay.
I will say I always believed, but that was my moment of understanding I had to put forth a part
Okay.
from my
Wow.
will or my understanding. I'm
Okay.
not trying to say I was a perfect kid or anything, but I really did care very much about doing right.
Yeah.
I wanted
So
to
so
please God.
okay. So what happens after college? Um, do you I know you did again some missions work, but what far as career, relationships, dating, when did you start dating? And then how did you eventually get into your first marriage? Like what's the story of post college for you?
Mhm.
Or maybe all this happened in college years. I don't know.
Didn't date a lot in high school or college. I dated, a couple different people, but not a lot. Um, so after college, I got a job. I had to pay off my student loans. So I got a job at Forest Home, which is a Christian camp in the San Bernardino Mountains. Worked there for a couple of years. I had also worked there in the summers between college years. So, and I camped there as a child. So Forest Home was a really special place for me to
Oh yeah, that
camp
place
and
is
to
legendary.
work. Yeah, yeah. Worked in the accommodations department, which was incredibly fun. I had wanted to be program staff because I wanted to work with kids, but oh my goodness, housekeeping was amazing. We had the best team. We had a great time. So, so I did that for a couple of years, and then while I was paying off loans, so the goal was just to finish paying off, and as soon as my debt was clear, I was going to go on the mission field. So when my uncle and my mom and my aunt were helping my grandparents with finances, they determined they would help each of us with our student loans. That opened the door for me. So I had already decided on Latin America mission. You were asking about dating. I dated one guy in my second year in Mexico, and I was actually engaged to a Colombian man
Okay.
when I lived in Colombia. Yeah. So, but that didn't work out. I think the distance, just maybe not enough foundation there in the
Okay.
relationship. But ultimately, not God's will for me either. After I moved back home, my thinking was to actually return to the mission field, not before a lot of time had passed. My goal uh, was to share more information with my church, which was not a church that was very knowledgeable about missions, and then to relaunch and go back as a long-termer. But I would say I got off the path some there. I ended up dating another guy who was definitely off course for me. And I would say that kind of sent me into what's the right word? I guess I was busy dating this guy. I was singing in a band. I was working on getting my teaching credential while teaching full time. And I would say I was in cruise mode at that time, just going through the motions, doing the daily things with life, continuing to take my kids to church and to get them plugged into all the good programs and all the homeschooling connections, but myself personally kind of cruising. So I just realized I skipped how I got into cruising with kids from cruising before marriage. I think cruising
You
before
can see where your
marriage.
love is. You really love these kids.
Oh yeah. I think probably cruising, allowing that passion to kind of die down that I had on the mission field. I was starting to concern myself with, the day-to-day matters of life in the United States. And then eventually I started to feel kind of lonely, like I was interested in seeing if I could find a relationship. And I dated a couple different guys. I think when I met Dave, my ex-husband, his sister was a really good friend of mine from church. And at that time in his life, he had really been very desperately clinging to the Lord. I saw a lot of things in him that were attractive, that made me feel he would always have the Lord first in his life. So even though I was kind of cruising, I guess, I don't know that I would have necessarily acknowledged that or understood that at the time. And I ended up seeing all of the good qualities in a man who also had a significant amount of damage and hurt in his life from his past. So I am somebody who has always liked being useful and needed and helpful. So it was sort of a natural attraction for me to find somebody who needed me. So I think we dated about 1.5 years, got married, and about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years later, we had our first daughter, Shalom. And 3 years after that, we had Soji, our second daughter. So that kind of leads up to the marriage and having kids early on. Not early on in life, but early in the marriage.
Okay.
Because I was 31 when I married. So
Yeah, and you said something very interesting, right? I mean, I find this in my own life, a pattern where I'm trying to save people, help people, and I find meaning in that. And it's been a long journey of the Lord showing me, like, hey, like, you're more wrapped up in this than they are in this, meaning their recovery, their healing, their transformation, than they personally are. That's I kind of sense that in you talked about, you're a useful person, right? That's loaded. you, you know
yeah.
in a good way, but also right in a self kind of harming way. Has that been kind of your
Yes.
journey of just discovering that about yourself? Because I find that to be true of many like missionaries and really like people that
Teachers, I've
are
probably fit some kind of description like a glove. Yes, I do think I began to recognize that about myself. Somewhere in there that I was, you could say that I had a rescuer personality. And I think a lot of that was corrected in that time period, because being a rescuer in marriage, it means your whole identity is wrapped up in fixing somebody. So so yeah, that was, I suppose it's easier to look at somebody else and see the things you can tweak than it is to look at yourself and say, what does God want from me right now?
Yeah.
So it's not so hard to see other people's what they could do to change a little bit to improve their lives, to fix something, to get out of a bad pattern. But
Yeah.
it
It's hard to
gets you
see it in
into a bad
yourself.
pattern too.
Yeah, and it's hard to
It's
see
hard
it
to
in
see it in
ourselves, right?
yourself.
Especially if you're a
Yes.
super fixer. If you're a super fixer, it's like, oh my gosh, like,
How do
because
you
you
get
just
from
it,
fixer to super fixer? Did I get out in time?
I think the Lord, sometimes gives us the boot, right? He says, okay, you need to find meaning beyond all these people you're trying to fix, and have some meaningful relationships, right, with people that don't need you to fix them. There, and I think that's part of the management of it, right? Like looking at your relationships and saying,
Mhm.
look, you have relationships with people that you can genuinely enjoy, and they reciprocate. Obviously, everyone has hurt points and dysfunctions and issues, but they're functional, right? They're vulnerable.
Yeah.
So I think, um, and I saw that in you, right? I saw that, that I also saw, because I met you when I think you and Dave had been married probably about 3 or 4 years at that point. You guys had been married like 2 years
Mhm.
before
Yeah.
the first one. Okay. Yeah. So I think, yeah. And I mean, you were like a model perfect wife, and, but it just never seemed like it would be enough. Um, again, from the outside looking in, um,
Mhm.
for the inner
I mean, you
healing
could
that
honestly
maybe.
look and say I was a hindrance, also
Yeah.
because when you try to do too much for other people, you're preventing them from doing it for
Yeah.
themselves. So, even beyond it not being ideal, you're actually being harmful to some degree, or can be, to
Absolutely.
that person you
Absolutely.
want to rescue.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I have this thing I want to share here. I don't know if it comes up there, but, um, um, how enabling harms both parties, right? Stagnation for the addict, which is what essentially you're saying. Um, I think Proverbs 19 verse 19 says, um, a hot-tempered person must pay the penalty. Rescue them, and you will have to do it again. That's interesting.
Mm. Oh, that's good.
Um, yeah. And then
It
emotional
feels like a
burnout for the
very
neighbor.
modern verse, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Emotional burnout for the enabler. Enablers may neglect their own well-being, becoming exhausted and resentful, right? The martyr, which is where I found myself in my pastoral ministry, always in this
Mm.
martyrdom state. And it was like, oh yeah, you're doing this to yourself. Like you keep setting yourself
Mm.
up, and you become exhausted, resentful, which hinders their relationship with God. Matthew 11, verse 28 to 30 says, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden or burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me." This is Yeshua. "For I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is
Mm.
light." So the idea that sometimes we think we need to be martyrs for people and suffer with them, and Jesus is like, no, the yoke I put on you is it's a burden, but you find joy and rest even in the midst of it. That's when you know you're doing God's work. Other people look at you and go, wow, like I can't believe you're able to teach 5-year-olds who are just completely ADHD and need classroom management. But if you're called to it, that burden, there's a rest into it. And I find that now in my pastoral
Mm.
counseling, I was substituting church religious Sunday production and institutional management with a real passion, that I had in the county jail when I got saved, which was just to be involved in people's lives personally. But there was no language for it. So everyone just said, hey, go to Bible college and become a pastor. and that meant you needed to be a CEO and run an institution and manage the politics and power and bureaucracy and the money and fundraising, which I hate it, and I still hate, and I feel sorry for all the pastors that are caught up in that trap, because if you talk to 99.9% of pastors and missionaries like you, they just want to be in contact with people, listening to them, dialoguing, touching them, hugging them, praying for them, breaking bread with them, being an ear, being an eye, being a hand, helping them build something. Um, that's what they imagined, which is exactly what Jesus did in his ministry. Um, they never saw themselves,
Yeah.
having to look at spreadsheets and call, and try to raise $5,000 to build, and there's nothing wrong with those type of people. It's an issue, there is a gift of administration.
Yeah.
But most, I think, people like you and I, um, but then that desire to rescue and touch people goes too far, right? Um, and it sounds to me like how did you come to the revelation that you needed to change something in this relationship? Because that's a big thing that you went through. When my wife told me that you guys had divorced, I knew that was devastating, and hard. It's hard to recover from when you love so hard and so purely. How did you recover?
Well,
I may be
exposed
losing connection.
to like live in.
I think your internet connection is kind of getting. You could log out and log back in if you need to. I think we, guys, I think we may have lost internet connection with her. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll get Debbie back here. She has such a powerful story. And if anything, we can continue this conversation about her life and her battle, her battle with cancer and what God's doing with her. Maybe at another time. I don't know. Hopefully she'll get back in here in the next minute or so. But for those who are watching, I do want to encourage you, if like Debbie and me, you find yourself in a situation where you're trying to save someone or save people, and you're constantly burnt out. Oh, there she goes. All right.
Okay, you see me? Can you hear me?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So my question was, when did you realize the situation you were in? You were stuck like a truck, and then you began to change. And then how did you deal with that sense of, yeah, you look nice. How did you deal with that sense of failure, right? Because there's always that sense of failure when people are going through divorce or separation, or even when they lose a job,
Well,
right?
I mean, I'm hard-headed. It took me, well, I mean, we shared a house or home for, I don't remember if it was 18 or 19 years. Like it took me a long, long, long time to get to the point where I said, okay, like at some point, if I'm praying for these results and nothing happens, and that no indication that of his willingness to change anything. And there's a lot behind that too. So I'll just say it hit me way later than it should. The fact that I thought I was being, like you called me, a godly wife, I think. I thought I was being a godly wife by being supportive and affirming and everything through all of those years. And ultimately, it occurred to me that, like, not only was I very late in coming to the conclusion that he wasn't going to change, I also realized that mistakes that I had made over the course of time were nothing that could ever be reversed, because it was all mistakes. Like, I should have said, you need to stop this and change the way you're approaching life or parenting or work or whatever the issue would happen to be at that time. So I understood where things were heading way later than I should have, because I am very, what's the right word? I don't know. I just had my mind fixed in a specific direction that God was going to heal him, heal the marriage. The following things were going to change, and that I was going to pray until it happened. And then a dear friend who is a warrior in prayer, her name's Tula. She came to me, and she is not somebody I had talked to about the problems in our household. And she said, God is waking me up at night to pray for you, and you need to get him out of the house right away. He's going to tear your children apart. And so while I had been focusing on accepting that there was no fixing the marriage, it was brought to my attention the pain that my kids were going through also. So at that point, it was a fight internally between the part of me that knew I never wanted to get a divorce and the part of me that knew I wanted to save my kids and stop being a prop up for Dave. He'd been leaning on me too heavily for many, many years. But it really was an impact to see from somebody else's eyes, and not even having seen it firsthand, but God showing her that my children were really being damaged. That was an eye opener, and that was where that lit a fire under me.
Wow.
So I ultimately ended up talking to him saying, there's nothing between the two of us anymore, but it's hurting the kids, and I need you to move out. And I gave him a year, honestly, to move out, because he'd been very sick. He hadn't been working. I didn't want him to be homeless. I didn't want my kids to have to worry about whether their dad had a place to sleep.
Wow.
So I was being reasonable in my mind to give him that amount of time. But from the time that we talked forward, things got very, very tense in the house. And then Soji had told me, oh, Dad said he's going to move with Grandma after he has to leave here. So then I understood he wasn't going to try to figure out a way to work and make some income and find a place to live so he could still spend time with his kids. He was going to move to Washington and live free off of his mom. So I was like, no, you're not getting a year just to sit around and play video games. And so I gave him a couple months at that point. And that was, he did end up going up to Washington. So I didn't, it wasn't precipitated, I guess, to make that decision.
Yeah.
So that's how all of that came about.
And then how many months or years after did you realize that you had cancer, and how did that these two experiences?
I've actually known that for a long time.
Okay.
I've known for a long time. Yeah. So just for your listeners, for a little context, I've always been, or from the time I was an adult, I've always taken kind of a natural healing route on everything. When I felt a lump in my breast, it was 12 or 13 years before I went in and got a diagnosis. So a long time had passed. Unfortunately, because I was wrapped up in trying to deal with things in my home, my household, trying to work and homeschool, and trying to, at that time, Dave was going through medical treatments for that resulted from a car accident he'd been in. So I was helping him to get to his chiropractic appointments and doctor appointments and all that stuff. So there was just too much on my plate. And when I felt the lump, I said, well, I know what to do. I'm just going to deal with that later. And I put it off and put it off and put it off and put it off until it caused lymphedema in my right arm because of cancer in the lymph nodes on the right side, like kind of in the underarm area. So I lost the use of my right arm completely. That's how badly I didn't want to go and confront the cancer and start on a medical route to healing. So that happened. So I knew for many years already, and I actually went in to a doctor not this past summer, but the previous, so summer of 2023. And I said, well, I'm here because I have cancer. She's like, well, do you have a diagnosis? I said, no, that's your role. You get to diagnose and tell me what to do next. So she said, well, I'm going to get you to an oncologist right away. We're going to get all your scans done. But I'm telling you now that you have advanced cancer, and this is your time to make plans with your family and spend as much time as you can together. So that was about a year and 3 or 4 months ago, almost a year and a half ago. So that's how I had it confirmed to me, but I already had known for a long time. So when I did end up getting an oncologist and going through all of the scans and everything, he gave me a diagnosis of stage 4 hormone positive metastatic breast cancer with metastases in the right lung, some lymph nodes, and bone. So I waited till it was really, spread out through the body before I ever went and saw a doctor.
Wow. So this was a year ago then, basically, that you found out the actual diagnosis?
Yeah, almost a year and a half.
So are you supposed to be alive right now?
Well, apparently I am.
Okay.
He doesn't, my oncologist did not give a time. And at one point my mom tried asking him, and I left the room. I said, I'm not going to have that psychological burden on myself, because my plan is to live the full span of life of my years. And so anyway, she later told me he said it's just impossible to know. So a lot depends on, well, obviously, if God is healing me, then it's a moot point. But for the typical cancer patient, a lot just depends on what treatments you get and how well you take care of yourself, in terms of exercise and what foods you're eating and sun exposure, all the kinds of things your body needs to function properly.
So the vitamin D from the sun, is that important as far as your treatment, or is it that you need to stay out of the sun completely?
I mean, it's not recommended by any means, but I don't have. I mean, I believe in Western medicine mostly for emergency type treatments. So if I'm in a car accident, I'll be really glad to be in an American hospital. But in terms of the functioning of the body, taking care of it properly, I don't put any kind of stake in what a doctor would recommend. I have gone against my doctor's advice on multiple things, but he always looks very surprised to see how well I'm doing. So he watched me go from I forgot what the test is that they do for the cancer I have, but it was over 400 when he first tested me, the cancer markers, and they're down at like 136 a couple months ago. Okay. Normal would be between 0 to 36, I think, or 32. So it has gone down by a tremendous amount. Again, my doctor always looks happily surprised. Yeah. And says, I'll see you in 3 months.
And what is your lifestyle like now? What is your lifestyle like?
My what?
What is your lifestyle? Yeah.
Mhm. So I stopped working after the diagnosis, and I was especially feeling physically bad at that time. I was weak, I was nauseous, I had no appetite. Um, so I decided to, not try to work. I didn't want to be able to not do a good job at my work. So I started, staying home and started the process of applying for disability. My typical day, I'm home most of the day, but I'm, healthy enough to go out and do errands, drive myself to the places I need to go. Um, I could do multiple things in one day now. Like I can go to the grocery store and stop by and see a friend without feeling super exhausted. I've contacted my employer to let her know I'd like to go back in January. So that tells you that I'm feeling well enough to work. I want to start with just one class first in this next semester and see how I feel. And so, life is sort of it's taken up by all the little things you're doing to work toward your healing. So there's an exercise component. There's walking, which I should do more often than I do. But I've got a rebounder, which is good to move lymphatic fluid. I've got this wave board, which is like a vibration plate. You stand on it and it strengthens bone just by you standing there. It's a passive form of exercise, which is really important because cancer also displaces calcium in the bone. So probably if you were to look at a scan of my skeleton right now, you would not see like a healthy, dense bone density. So anyway, there's, the exercise component, there's the specific food component, preparing meals, which I'm okay at. I've gotten better, but because I don't have a really good appetite, I often don't prepare food as often as I should, or I'll snack instead of eating a proper meal. So that's something I need to work on, improving, just making sure I'm getting the right foods. Like
Okay.
it's easy for me to wipe out the wrong foods. Like I've been off of sugar most of my adult life, so that part's easy. Bread's a little harder, but I'm supposed to be drinking 64 ounces of fresh pressed juices every day, and I just cannot make myself do it.
Okay.
It's
Wow.
yeah.
So
My
your diet is,
appetite's totally different. Like,
yeah. And I mean,
go ahead.
this is your diet is probably the diet we all should have. And essentially, like, what is your diet? Like, is it mainly greens, like, spinaches, the leafy greens? Is it, uh, quinoa? Like, what does it consist of?
Um, so ideally, there's the ideal and there's the reality, because I did start getting so queasy over the kinds of foods that I'm supposed to be eating. I've had to get sneaky a little bit, but I initially wanted to follow a plan called Square One. It's by Chris Wark, who also beat cancer through diet. And it is, you could say it's whole food plant-based. The first 90 days are raw. So you're supposed to be drinking all of these juices and huge salads every day. Instead, I have a tendency more to, I'll like make a smoothie that has a lot of powdered herbs and things in it. So I'm still trying to get the good nutrition from the greens without feeling sick from drinking the juices. So if I put all the powdered herbs in, like with chocolate powder, I can manage most of those foods I need to get down every day. But diet definitely needs improvement. We'll extend grace that way.
Okay. Wow. So
If I felt I had the ability to follow that raw vegan diet, I would be
Okay.
following that for this healing period.
And
Jack, I don't know if I would say that means that's what everyone should be eating.
sure.
Like
Yeah, we know that.
I
Yeah.
think it's an extreme diet.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what do you has the doctors, or have you thought through like causation, like, is this hereditary, is it stress induced, is it because you pretty much were living, I mean, did you change your sugar-free, healthy, conscious lifestyle before you found out or after you found out? And what do you think is the cause? Is just kind of,
Well, so
you know
I think I go through cycles with how I eat. So I've gone through many like extended periods of really healthy eating, and I've gone through extended periods of moderately healthy eating and other extended periods of really unhealthy eating. Like I used to sneak into the cabinet and get a spoonful of sugar as a snack when I was a kid. I was pretty bad. So I would say in terms of health foundation, I would say probably not good, but probably a natural predisposition toward good health. Like I haven't been sick much in my life. In my case, it's hormone positive, and that does mean that something is off kilter in your system, because you would normally be producing hormones in the right quantities, the appropriate hormone at the appropriate time. Because I have a hormone positive cancer, that means I've been overproducing specifically estrogen and progestin. So I was taking hormone inhibitor for up until very recently to stop the production of hormones, which is problematic in other ways. So it helps the cancer isn't growing aggressively because I'm blocking those hormone receptors. But the negative side is you also are missing out on specific like nutrition that you should be getting. Like I'm not supposed to have there are these two specific amino acids that feed cancer. Well, so that means that they're recommending you don't eat dairy, you don't eat meat, but you've got bone density problems. So you need the nutrition in those foods. And it's, so in terms of the trajectory of my life, I would say I've had a desire to have a pretty clean diet and clean environment. So I don't keep Clorox or stuff like that at the house. I've got vinegar and borax. And so I would be like the last person anybody would have said she's going to get cancer, because I've been trying to like keep my environment clean for such a long time.
Absolutely.
And I still think it's worth doing.
Oh yeah.
I still think it's worth, because statistically, go ahead.
Yeah,
Jeff.
I've adopted a kind of holistic, clean diet because I was pre-diabetic. My triglycerides were extremely high, and bottom line, you feel better. You feel better.
You've
the
always
food,
been athletic. I'm surprised.
Well, it's hereditary. My Armenian side, we have high cholesterol, and we tend to be diabetic because of all the carbs that turn into sugar. All the pita bread, all the rice. So growing up like that, I mean, and you have a high metabolism when you're young, but boom,
Right.
when you hit 40, 45, everything starts to change. And but I think, and then I developed an allergy to seed oils. I think that's just eating a lot of just In-N-Out and Chick-fil-A. And
honestly, you're not missing anything. You're not missing anything with getting rid of the seed oils.
Yeah.
So do you know that I think it's olive and avocado that are okay because the oil is expressed from the actual flesh of the fruit rather than the seeds.
Oh yeah, olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil. This the oils that I eat with, and 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 it doesn't go through all the processing, right? Which is where all the toxicity is being developed.
Right.
And it's incredible how they're adding it to everything now. They're even diluting it and adding it to olive oils, unless you get like pressed virgin certain type of olive oil. You're pretty much getting 90% olive oil and 10% seed oil, But last question.
Honey too. Did you know
I,
that?
What's that?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I said honey too. Honey is often they mix it with high fructose corn syrup and they sell it as honey.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, we are, that's what I loved about Robert Kennedy Jr. Is his especially his discussion and conversation about the industry, and I think he's very important. And I feel like we need to do another podcast, especially on how your theology has influenced your politics and yeah. Well, not political, but and then also to understand more about what your teaching and your future. What are you thinking about the future? But my last question to you, just for this podcast, and I got to jump into another meeting, is how's your faith playing a role? Your relationship with Yeshua in all of this?
Well, I think that's what this whole thing is about. I think he kicked me out of cruise control. And I think a lot of us have prayed those prayers, God, whatever it takes, help me to draw closer to you, or help me to hear your voice, or help me to know what you want. So that has been, one of my prayers over the years, off and on, just that when I have felt myself in cruise mode, knowing that's not what God wants from me, I've prayed that he would do whatever it takes. And I prayed that prayer many times. And I think, maybe every time I prayed, it was opportunity for me to make changes that would ensure that I would continue to draw closer to the Lord. And instead, I would sort of pray it and go on with my day. I believe that, our friend Leah Klingseis once said to me, God will do anything he has to do to us to get our attention and to draw us close to him. And I remember thinking, it was the first time anyone had said it in exactly that way to me. And I knew she was saying God could take my life, or somebody I love, or cause allow a car accident, or so I would say I was cruising. I would say the whole reason for this diagnosis is that God wants a deeper relationship with me, but he also has things in mind for me that don't involve just cruising through life. And that he's got a plan, a purpose, a reason for me having a cancer diagnosis, but also a reason for healing me and bringing me through it. So I would say I'm thankful. I can really say I'm thankful for the diagnosis, because this was his intention, was to refocus me. I honestly think I would have been capable of going through the next 25 years living a pretty comfortable life, doing mostly the right things, but not connecting with the Lord the way he so desires. And so I think that's why he allowed me to have a cancer diagnosis. That's why he's not given me a quick healing, but that he's giving me like a slow process in order to ensure that I'll stay on that track, continue to move toward him, continue to seek him. I do think it's soon, though. I think whatever it is he's got for me, and maybe this podcast is part of how he wants to use me too.
Amen. And I know this is going to touch a lot of people
So
because he,
it's been a
yeah,
blessing, Jack. Like, it's been a
yeah,
blessing to get this diagnosis.
amen. It takes real,
Hard though. I was
yeah,
terrified.
yeah. It takes real
I
faith,
was
and
really
it takes
scared.
real,
Even
yeah,
even when I told myself I'm not dying, like I
yeah,
was still really scared.
yeah. It takes real faith, real courage to live the kind of life that you've lived, and to make the decisions that you've made, even with your
Mm.
marriage and the way that you're
God
choosing
has
to,
put people
yeah.
around me. Yeah.
Well, thank you,
God has put
Debbie.
people in my life to bring everything to fruition.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Debbie. I appreciate this. We have to keep having this conversation because, as you know, suffering is a reality for all of us. Even when you think you're on top of the mountain and you're going to avoid suffering, suffering comes to all of us. And that's why we need to understand suffering, not just in our head, but and understand how to prepare for it in
Mm.
our hearts. And Paul said that he asked the Lord to remove the thorn from his flesh 3 times. And the Lord said, I'm not going to remove it, because Paul said in order to keep me humble, right? Because he knew he was prone towards independence, towards hubris, right? That's human nature. We all
Yeah.
are. God put
Yeah.
this thorn, and then the Lord told him that when you're weak, Paul, I am strong. And there are things that are in all of our lives that it seems the Lord is not giving us deliverance from, because it draws us close to him in dependency. Now, this is not an excuse for the things you can control and must
Mm-hmm.
surrender and change and transform, and bad relationships. Like people should not convolute this. The thorn in the flesh are things that we can't control. Disease, death, war, things that are outside of us, someone trying to kill you, right? These are realities. Yes, Jesus would try to escape, but there comes a time where you can't escape no more. And so I think this is where
Mm-hmm.
the rubber meets the road, and everything that we understand about Yahweh and suffering, I think, and the help of the Holy Spirit, because he's in us, he's an intimate partner, really comes to play. And I'm telling you, you're a hero. You're someone that I'm looking up to, and to for you to be able to talk about it. I think a source of blessing, but understand it strengthens and encourages other people who are afraid of that dark
Mm.
ghost shadow, whether it's cancer, whether it's poverty, whether it's Trump becoming president, or Kamala Harris. I mean, people have monsters in the closet that they're terrified by, that are dictating their life
Mm-hmm.
and how they're going to choose to respond. And you've chosen to respond even in your pain. And I'm sure you have your down days like Elijah the prophet, where you're just like, God, take me. But even with that, it seems
Mm-hmm.
that the Lord's comfort is with you, and I really appreciate you. We appreciate you, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Jack. This was fun, and I'd be happy to talk again anytime. And please give your wife a big hug from me.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Jack.
Welcome to the Jack Hakimian Podcast, where we dive deep into life, embracing the contrast. From culture to faith, art to finances, politics and everything in between, we're taking chances. Jack Hakimian Podcast, we shine a light, exploring all of life from day to night. Nothing is off the table, we keep it real. Diverse perspectives, the truth we reveal.